My name is Elias Mendoza. I am 51 years old, a husband, a father of two, and a pastor in Bacolod City, Philippines. For over 2 decades, I've led a small, humble congregation, tucked between sugarcane fields and quiet roads. My church isn't famous, our building isn't modern, and our live stream rarely gets more than 20 views. But to me, it has always been holy ground. I've baptized young men who once wanted to run away from their homes. I've buried elders who whispered their final amens with peace. I've prayed with broken wives, hungry children, and angry husbands. And every Sunday I preached as if the Lord might come that day. But if I'm honest, deep down, I never truly expected him to. Most people see me as stable, grounded. I'm the man who knows scripture, who visits the sick at night, who brings rice when families lose jobs. But behind that steadiness, I was beginning to feel something was missing. Not in my faith, no, but in my sense of urgency. I believed in the second coming, yes, but it always felt distant, safe. The kind of warning you share out of obligation, not conviction. My wife Clarita would sometimes ask, "Do you really think we're in the end?" Times, Eli, I would smile, sip my coffee and say, "Only God knows." But I didn't search. I didn't pray with fire. Not until that day in May. It was a Sunday like any other. I woke up before sunrise to polish my sermon titled "The Peace That Surpasses Understanding." My daughter, Abigail, had made me some salabat tea. My son Nathan helped load the sound system into the church van. The worship team was already practicing when I arrived. Everything was normal, too normal. We prayed, we sang. I preached from Philippians. We ended with a chorus of "Here I Am, Lord." And I remember looking out over the pews, smiling at the faithful faces I had seen for years, but feeling this strange, unshakable sense of heaviness, as if something unseen was watching, waiting. After service, I visited Brother Manuel, one of our oldest members, who had been confined in Riverside Medical. He had recently survived a stroke and was still too weak to talk. I brought him warm soup, read him Psalm 121, and held his hand in prayer. On the drive home, the sun was sharp and golden. The jeepneys honked in the distance. I remember singing an old Tagalog hymn, "Di ko kayang buhayin." My heart was at peace, or so I thought, until everything shattered. I was approaching a blind curve near La Carlota Road. I didn't see it coming. A delivery truck, its brakes screaming like a wounded animal, swerved out of control and headed straight for my windshield. I had no time to react, no time to call out. All I remember was a deafening crash. Metal, folding like paper glass, exploding in every direction. Then, silence. A silence that felt not like death, but like stepping through a curtain. There was no pain, no more noise, just weightlessness, just stillness, just light. I opened my eyes, or maybe my soul did. I saw my body slumped over the steering wheel. Blood, smoke, people screaming in the distance, sirens. And I was above it all, hovering, watching, detached, but still very much myself. I tried to speak. I couldn't. I tried to cry. Nothing came. Yet what overwhelmed me wasn't fear. It was peace. Pure, clean peace. A kind I had never known, not even in worship, not even in prayer. I remember thinking, "Am I dead?" And then a voice, not spoken but impressed upon my soul, answered, "You are not lost." In that moment, I knew something sacred was happening. I was being taken, not in judgment, but in purpose. All the sermons I had preached, the prayers I had offered, the scriptures I had quoted, none of it could prepare me for what came next. Because I was about to meet the one I had preached for, but never truly expected to see so soon. Time didn't move the way it used to. I wasn't sure if seconds had passed or centuries. I hovered above the wreckage, watching paramedics race towards my shattered vehicle. They yelled my name, but they didn't know it. Sir, can you hear us?" I wanted to tell them. I could hear everything. I just wasn't there. My body was broken and bleeding, yes, but the real me was more alive than I had ever felt. I was weightless but not empty, whole but not physical. My senses were sharper than ever. I could smell the burnt rubber, feel the heat of the sun, and even sense the thoughts and emotions of those around me. Panic, grief, confusion. Yet through all of that chaos, I felt only one thing: stillness. Deep, soul deep stillness. Then the stillness became light. It didn't come from the sky. It came from everywhere beneath me, above me, inside me. The light was alive. It pulsed, breathed, invited. And I began to move not by walking, but by being drawn. The city, the street, the sirens, they all melted away like mist. In their place, a vast, endless field appeared. It wasn't earthly. It wasn't even heavenly by the way we usually imagine it. There were no golden streets, no pearly gates, just light and presence. Not a blinding light, but a warm, living glow that wrapped around my soul like a father's embrace. Then I knew I wasn't just in any place. I was in the presence of God. And suddenly, He was there, not as a vision, not as an idea, but as a person. Alive, present, glorious. Jesus. He didn't need to announce Himself. My spirit knew, like the way a child knows his mother's voice, even in the womb. He stood about 30 feet away at first, clothed in radiant light that seemed to move with him. His eyes, oh his eyes. They weren't just looking at me, they were reading me, every thought, every failure, every doubt I had ever buried beneath sermons and prayers. But instead of fear, I felt only love. Pure, piercing love. I wanted to fall flat on my face, to bury my shame in the ground beneath me, but my spirit had no knees to bend. Still He walked towards me step by step like a king, approaching a servant, and a friend approaching someone he had missed for far too long. Then He stopped just an arm's length away, and He spoke. Elias, my beloved servant, you've known my words, but now you will know my heart. I couldn't breathe, not because I was afraid, but because something in His voice felt like a song I had been trying to remember my entire life. He looked into me through me. There was nowhere to hide, yet I didn't want to. Everything in me wanted to be known, to be exposed, to be healed. I tried to speak, but no words came. I tried to cry, but no tears formed. I just stood there, utterly seen and utterly loved. You have preached about the end, but never truly believed it would come in your lifetime. You warned others, but your soul stayed asleep. Elias, I have brought you here not to punish you, but to awaken you. For the days are evil, and the time is near. His words didn't fall on ears. They entered straight into my spirit like thunder and honey combined. I felt the weight of them like heavy scrolls being unrolled inside my chest. I have chosen you to see what others refuse to see, and to speak what others are afraid to say. You must go back. You must tell them, not just that I am coming, but that the world is already preparing for the one who will try to come in my place. My soul trembled. I didn't understand what He meant, not fully, but I would, soon. He stretched out His hand, and when it touched my shoulder, I felt as if lightning and warmth had fused into a single touch. All of my memories, all of my regrets, all of my hidden fears. He absorbed them, not with a judgment, but with healing. Suddenly a scene opened around us like a living window. I saw nations, cities, families, some weeping, some deceived. I saw war rising like smoke from the ground. I saw leaders shaking hands with blood still on their palms. I saw churches, some burning with true fire, others flickering like dying candles. And above it all, I saw a great deception, moving like a fog. There will come one who promises peace, but his peace is poison. He will speak of unity, but sow division. He will smile, but hide a serpent beneath his tongue. You must tell them, not to fear, but to watch, to pray, to prepare their lamps. I felt as if my spirit was being stretched to its limit. The images, the words, the truth, it was more than I ever expected to bear. But I knew I wasn't allowed to look away. Not now. Not ever again. And as the vision began to dim, Jesus turned back to me. His expression was tender but firm. Elias, the world will mock you. Some will hate you. But others will hear and turn and be saved. You will not walk alone, for I will be with you until the end. And with those words, the field of light began to fade. The warmth began to slip away. I was being pulled back into pain, into brokenness, into time. But I carried something with me now. Not fear, not confusion, but fire and a mission. As the brilliance around me dimmed and his hand slowly withdrew from my shoulder, I felt as though I had just stood in the center of a storm made of light. But there was no destruction, only transformation. And yet, it wasn't over. I didn't return to my body immediately. Instead, the ground beneath us, if it could even be called ground, began to shift. It was as though I stood on the threshold of eternity, and that threshold had just opened. Suddenly, the veil between dimensions parted, not with noise, but with a trembling silence. Jesus extended his hand again, not to comfort, but to lead. Elias, there is more I must show you. For unless my people see what lies ahead, they will not be ready. Come. And with that, we moved not by walking, but by being moved. It was as though my spirit obeyed his voice more swiftly than thought. The first realm we entered was not of punishment, but of sorrow. It was earth, but not as it is. A shadow of what will be. Cities stood in ruin, not from bombs or earthquakes, but from within decay of the spirit. Churches that once sang with joy were now empty, their doors locked, their lights extinguished. Crosses still stood, but the faith behind them had grown cold. I saw people walking with their eyes wide open, but blind to the truth, blind to love. Each soul carried chains. Some were forged from pride, others from comfort, and many from fear disguised as wisdom. And yet they smiled as though everything was fine, while the sky above them darkened with each passing hour. This is what apathy will bring, when my people trade the fire of truth for the warmth of convenience. We moved again. This time the scene burned into me with holy terror. A war unlike any I had imagined, not only of nations and soldiers, but of ideologies and spirits. I saw digital towers crumble, economies implode, alliances fracture. Men in suits spoke of peace but carried knives behind their backs. The air was thick with lies, and truth had become treason. But the most frightening sight was a face. A man rose not from the shadows but from the stage. A man adored, respected. The peacemaker, they called him. He was handsome, articulate, charismatic. His smile healed wounds. His words could end wars. And yet, when I looked into his eyes, I saw a void, a hollow core where no love existed, only calculation. And beyond him stood another, cloaked in darkness, watching, waiting. He is the forerunner, the mouthpiece, the shadow of the one to come. The world will fall at his feet and call it salvation. Tears filled my eyes, not just from fear, but from ache. Ache for the many who would follow this path, thinking it was light. And I asked, trembling, Lord, will anyone see through him? Those who know my voice will not follow a stranger. They will suffer. They will be hated. But they will endure. We ascended again this time to a place radiant with fire. But it was not hellfire. It was holy fire. I saw small gatherings scattered across the globe. Hidden rooms, forest clearings, basement churches. Elderly couples holding hands. Children singing in candlelight. Their prayers rose like incense. Their faith burned like coals untouched by the storm. These are my remnant. The ones who do not bow. Their light pierces the dark. For every lie that spreads, I raise a voice of truth. Then I saw angels, not the gentle kind on Christmas cards. These were warriors, armored, glorious. They stood beside the remnant swords drawn not of metal but of light and truth. And as the world below bent under chaos, these messengers fought battles unseen, keeping evil at bay where prayers rose like fire. I was weeping now, overwhelmed, exhausted, but still we weren't done. The final vision came like a trumpet blast, loud, clear, and final. A great clock suspended in the heavens, not mechanical, living. Its hands were not ticking, they were trembling, 1 second away from midnight. And etched into its face were these words: "The time is near." Elias, tell them. The time of comfort is passing. The time of clarity has come. Watch, pray, awaken, for the days ahead will not wait. I turned towards him, wanting to ask more, but I couldn't. My soul was stretched thin, like a harp string pulled to its final note. I fell to my knees, if a spirit could kneel, and whispered the only words that remained. Use me. Jesus didn't smile. He burned. And in that burning I felt the holiness of 1,000 suns, and the gentleness of a whisper through leaves. You will return, but you will not be the same. And in that instant, the light around us began to collapse, not violently, but like a curtain being drawn. The visions faded. The angels disappeared, and his presence began to move behind the veil again. But not before I felt him place one final touch on my chest, where my heart used to beat. And then, like a stone dropped in a still lake, I fell. Down, down, back through layers of light, memory, and flesh. Back to the place of pain. Back to earth. I returned with a gasp. The pain was sudden, like crashing back into a prison of flesh. My lungs screamed. My ribs felt like fire. My eyes fluttered open, only to be met with chaos. Sirens wailed. Figures moved quickly above me. Paramedics' voices urgent and trembling. Someone shouted, "He's back! He's breathing!" I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. But I was aware, and within me was silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper, like the echo of eternity still ringing in my chest. I tried to reach for it, but my body wouldn't respond. I was back, but I didn't belong. Not anymore. I was placed into the ambulance, oxygen masks secured over my face, and as we sped toward the hospital, I looked out through the glass panels above me, the same sky, but now it felt like a veil, a thin curtain behind which I had just stood. A world that still looked normal but wasn't, not after what I'd seen. At the hospital, doctors surrounded me. Needles, machines, cold hands. I heard whispers. Massive collision. How is he still alive? I wanted to tell them why. I wanted to tell them who had touched me. But my tongue felt bound, not by injury but by the weight of what I had to carry. That night, alone in the sterile white room, with the steady beeping of a heart monitor beside me, I finally had time to feel. My body ached, my mind raced, but my soul was burning. The Lord had spoken, and now I had to decide what to do with what I'd been shown. I looked down at my hands, shaking hands scarred from the crash, and I wondered, would anyone believe me? Would I believe myself if I hadn't lived it? My wife Anna came the next morning. Her eyes were swollen, her steps cautious. But the moment our eyes met, she knew. Something had changed. Something in me no longer belonged fully to this world. Elle, she whispered, what happened to you? I looked at her. This woman who had shared every season of my life, and I broke. Tears spilled from my eyes and I whispered hoarsely, I saw him. She sat beside me, her hand trembling as it found mine. Jesus, she asked, already knowing. I nodded. But how could I begin to explain? How could I pour the thunder and the flame and the love and the terror into mere syllables I didn't even know where to start? So I spoke slowly, gently. I told her of the crash, the moment I left my body, the light, the voice, the warnings, the man of peace who was not peace, the heavenly clock ticking toward something unthinkable. Anna didn't interrupt. She simply listened, her eyes wide, her face pale. When I finally stopped, her only words were, "You have to tell them." Tell them. The words felt like fire. I knew I had to. I also knew it would cost me. That Sunday, I returned to my pulpit. The church was full. Word of the accident had spread through our small town like wildfire. People came out of sympathy, curiosity, or concern. Some just wanted to see if their pastor had truly lost his mind. I stood behind the wooden lectern, my Bible open, my hands trembling. I looked out at the sea of familiar faces, some smiling, some cautious, some skeptical, and I knew this was not going to be a normal sermon. I cleared my throat, prayed silently, and then said, "I need to tell you something that will change the way you see me, and maybe the way you see the world." I told them everything, not polished, not poetic, but honest, raw, real. I told them about leaving my body, about Jesus, about the war to come, about the counterfeit prince who would seduce the nations, about the faithful remnant and the burning lights in the darkness. There was silence, not the kind of silence that waits politely for a sermon to end, a heavy silence. Some faces paled, some frowned. A few nodded slowly. Others looked down as if unsure whether to believe or to bolt. After the service, people approached me one by one, some with tears, some with warnings. A deacon pulled me aside and whispered, "Pastor, be careful. Not everyone's ready to hear this kind of talk." But the fire in my chest wouldn't go out. Back home, Anna and I sat in the quiet. Our children asked questions. My phone buzzed with messages, some encouraging, some mocking. Old friends called me a fanatic. Others stopped answering my texts. I had returned to their world, but not to comfort, not to ease. I had returned to speak. That night, I stood alone in our backyard, the cool wind brushing against my hospital scars. Above me, the stars shimmered with ancient light, and I whispered, "Lord, they don't believe me. Some think I'm broken. Some think I'm lying. I don't know if I can do this. They mock me too. But the truth is not weighed by popular opinion. Keep going. Speak what you saw. I am with you." His words were not loud, but they were stronger than thunder. I took a deep breath. The night air felt different now. Not empty, but charged, like a battlefield before dawn. And in my chest, the flame still burned. The days that followed felt like walking through fire, not because of my injuries, those were healing, but because of the war inside. The weight of the message burned in my bones, and yet so many around me didn't want to hear it. My sermons were no longer comfortable. They were warnings, alarms, trumpets in the night. I could feel the shift in my congregation. Some leaned in desperate for truth. Others pulled back disturbed by what they could not understand. The first week back, I preached on vigilance. The second on deception. By the third Sunday, a man I'd known for 20 years stood up and walked out in the middle of the message. Others followed. That night I wept, not because I was angry, but because I understood. What I'd seen was terrifying. What I was saying sounded impossible, and yet it was real. More real than anything I had ever preached before. The Lord had not given me this vision for applause. He had given it for warning. At 3 a.m., I found myself sitting alone in the church sanctuary. The stained glass windows glowed faintly under the moonlight. I whispered into the silence, "Lord, why me? I'm not a prophet. I'm not strong. I'm just a man with a Bible and a heart that breaks too easily. Because you are willing, and the willing are more powerful than the proud. You do not speak from ego, but from obedience. That is why I chose you." His voice filled the room, not in sound, but in presence. And with it came strength. Not the strength of muscle or might, but the strength of knowing that I was not alone. The next day, I recorded my testimony. A young man from the church, Daniel, helped me set up the camera. "Pastor," he said, "whatever happens, I believe you, and I'll help however I can." We uploaded the video online. Within hours it began to spread. First a few hundred views, then thousands. Comments poured in. Some were desperate. I had the same dream. I thought I was going crazy. Others were cruel. This man is delusional. Fear-mongering at its worst. But among the noise, there were also voices. Awakening. I received emails from pastors in Brazil, teachers in Canada, mothers in the Philippines, truck drivers from South Africa. They wrote, "We are seeing the signs too. This confirms what God has shown me. Tell us more. We want to prepare." Something was stirring. But so was the opposition. Leaders from my own denomination began to distance themselves. One called me privately, voice heavy with concern. "Elijah," he said, "your message is dangerous. You're scaring people. Are you sure this wasn't just trauma hallucination?" I paused. Then I said gently, "Brother, if you had stood before the eyes of Jesus and seen what I saw, you would understand. It wasn't meant to be safe." Soon invitations came. Churches, podcasts, conferences. They wanted to hear my story. But I made a decision. I would not turn this into a tour. This was not for fame. Each time I stepped up to speak, I prayed, "Lord, let them see only you." And something strange began to happen. As I spoke, people would weep. Hardened hearts softened. Old wounds reopened and began to heal. I saw grown men fall to their knees. I saw teenagers trembling in conviction. Not because of me, but because of the one who had sent me. Still, the cost grew higher. I lost friends. Longtime members left the church. I received anonymous threats, emails telling me to shut up before I spread panic and insanity. My wife, God bless her, stood firm beside me. "Let them call us mad," she said. "I would rather be mocked for truth than praised for silence." One night I dreamed again. In the dream, I stood before a massive wall of darkness. Behind me were thousands of flickering lights. People with candles, some strong, some barely burning. A voice whispered, "Speak, and the flames will rise." When I woke, I knew my mission was not to convert the world. It was to awaken those with ears to hear, to find the remnant, to warn the watchmen. So I began small gatherings in homes, just 10-20 people. We studied prophecy. We prayed deep into the night. We fasted. We asked God to make us ready, not just physically, but spiritually. And there, in those living rooms and basements, I saw revival begin. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. One evening, an old farmer named Ben came up to me with tears in his eyes. "Preacher," he said, "I ain't prayed like this in 30 years. But now, I feel the fire again." That's when I knew the message was doing what it was meant to do. Not entertain, not terrify, but awaken. The darkness is growing, but so is the hunger for light. Feed them with truth, Elijah. Even if your voice trembles, even if you're rejected, I am with you. And so I kept speaking, even when it cost me, even when the crowds shrank, even when the world mocked, because the clock was still ticking, and I had seen what comes when it strikes the appointed hour. I woke up to the blinding lights of the emergency room. Blurred faces hovered above me, beeping monitors, the sterile smell of antiseptic. Someone shouted, "He's conscious." But for a few seconds I couldn't speak. My throat was raw, my chest ached. I blinked, trying to make sense of where I was and where I had just come from. Was it a dream? No. The weight in my spirit was too real. The memory of his eyes, Jesus' eyes, burned too deeply to be denied. I had stood before him. I had heard the warning. I had seen the war, the deception, the false peace. But now, I was back. Back in a world that moved on without knowing how close it stood to the edge. I was released from the hospital 3 days later. My injuries surprisingly were minor, nothing life-threatening. The doctors called it a miracle. I knew it was. But not for the reason they thought. Back at home, Ellen watched me with quiet intensity. She knew, even before I said a word, that something in me had changed. "Michael," she asked one evening, "what really happened to you?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to share, but because I didn't know how. How do you describe eternity? How do you put fire into words? But I couldn't hold it in any longer. So I began. I told her about the crash, about the moment my soul left my body, about the light, the presence, the love, the eyes of Jesus, His voice, the vision, the war, the man of peace who wasn't peace, the deception, the remnant. By the time I finished, tears were flowing freely down her face, but not from fear, from understanding, from the kind of reverence that comes when you know you've just heard something holy. I believe you, she whispered. I don't understand it all, but I believe you. That gave me the courage to tell our children. Luke, our son, stared at me in silence. Sarah, our daughter, cried quietly, clutching Ellen's hand. They didn't say much, but I could see it in their eyes. Something had taken root. Still, I knew the real test would come when I spoke to the church. The following Sunday, I stepped into the pulpit with trembling hands. The sanctuary was full. News of my accident had spread. People came expecting a triumphant story of survival. What they heard was something else. I told them everything. Not a word was held back. And as I spoke, the room fell still. Like a funeral. Except the dead thing wasn't a person, it was their comfort. Their illusion that the world was safe, that everything would just go on as it always had. Some wept. Others stared blankly. A few shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. But I kept going. Because I had to. Because the Lord had told me, do not be silent. After the service, many came forward to thank me. Others stood in the back whispering. A few left early. By Monday morning, I had emails, some encouraging, some skeptical, a few angry. Then came the meetings. One deacon called me into his office. Pastor, he said cautiously, your experience is powerful, but some feel it's unsettling. Perhaps we should tone it down. Focus more on grace, less on judgment. I looked him in the eyes. Grace is why I speak. Warning is love, and love doesn't stay silent when danger is coming. He didn't respond. That week, a local news outlet called. They'd heard rumors. A pastor in Springfield who claimed to have seen the end. They wanted an interview. I declined. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't ready to turn this sacred encounter into public spectacle. Still, the story got out. People started talking. Some mocked. Some came searching. One man emailed me late at night. I thought I was crazy, he wrote. But I had the same dream about the false peacemaker. Now I know I'm not alone. But the criticism grew louder too. A radio host labeled me a doomsday preacher. A blogger accused me of exploiting trauma. Even friends, people I had prayed with, baptized, counseled, began to distance themselves. And yet, the fire never dimmed, because I had seen him. Do not look to their faces, Michael. Look to my face. Speak what you've seen. Let them mock, let them doubt. I was mocked too, but my word does not return void. So I kept speaking at Bible studies, in living rooms, in whispered conversations with seekers too scared to speak aloud. And something started to happen. A few at first, then more. People began to ask questions they hadn't asked in years. What does Scripture say about the end? What does it mean to discern spirits? How do we prepare our children for deception? They weren't panicking. They were awakening. And that was enough. Even if others laughed, even if I lost status, even if my name became a punchline. Because I wasn't trying to build a ministry. I was trying to warn the people. It didn't take long before the ripples reached beyond Springfield. The video of my Sunday sermon, recorded quietly by one of our youth leaders, had been posted online without my knowing. At first, only a few hundred watched, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Within 2 weeks, it had gone viral. Some called me a prophet, others called me a lunatic. But everywhere, it sparked a question. What if he's right? Emails poured in from pastors, from atheists, from people in cities I had never heard of. Your vision matches a dream I had in 2019. I've seen that false peacemaker in a vision too. My grandmother told me something like this before she passed. People weren't just curious, they were convicted. But with the awakening came the backlash. Some churches released public statements distancing themselves from me. Others warned their congregants not to be led astray by emotional stories. A few accused me of spiritual manipulation, claiming I had weaponized fear. It hurt, but the pain was different now. Not the pain of rejection, but the burden of seeing people asleep while the storm gathers overhead. Even in Springfield, the air felt different. I would walk into a grocery store and feel the stares. Whispers followed me in coffee shops. Parents pulled their children closer as if the warning I carried might somehow infect them. And yet, in the quiet corners of this town, light was breaking through. I began to notice little things. A small group of high schoolers meeting after class to pray. A retired couple opening their home for nightly Bible study. A single mom, one I'd never met, dropping a note at my office that simply read, "Thank you for waking us up." One night, as I stood on my back porch under the stars, Ellen came up beside me. Her voice was steady but soft. "Michael, do you realize what's happening?" I looked at her. "You didn't just survive a crash," she said. "You crashed the silence. People are listening again. People are watching the skies." That night I wept, not from sorrow, but from hope. Because despite all the noise, despite the scorn, I was seeing with my own eyes the beginning of what Jesus had shown me. The faithful remnant was rising. They will gather not in stadiums, but in hidden places. Not with banners, but with broken hearts. They will not wear crowns, but carry crosses. And I will dwell among them. One of the most unexpected letters came from Manila. A young pastor wrote saying that his congregation had fallen into apathy, drained by pandemic scandal and politics. But after watching my testimony, something changed. They had begun meeting daily for prayer. His final line struck me like thunder. "We no longer wait for revival to come. We are the revival." And still, the opposition came. A Christian influencer accused me of fear-mongering dressed in spiritual clothes. A seminary professor dismissed me as yet another emotionally unstable pastor with post-traumatic visions. Even my own denomination requested a formal review of my teachings. But the fire wouldn't leave, because I knew what I had seen. I knew who had spoken, and I knew what was coming. The false peace, the man of charisma, the slow erosion of discernment in exchange for comfort, the new unity built on sand. So I kept writing, kept preaching, kept warning. But more than that, I began building. We launched midnight prayer gatherings. No live streams, no lights, just raw worship, repentance, word, watchfulness. And people came, farmers, lawyers. They came because they were hungry for truth that pierces the fog, hungry to feel something real again, hungry to see beyond headlines, beyond politics, beyond the performance of Sunday religion. And in that hunger, they found each other, in basements, in barns, in forgotten chapels. The church began to breathe again, not as a brand or a building, but as a body. "Michael, you are not alone. You are one voice, but I have lit thousands. My sheep know my voice, and they will come." One Friday evening, I sat down in my study and began drawing a map, not of cities, but of souls. Every letter, every testimony, every church reignited, every youth group revived. I drew them all out. The page began to glow with life. And that's when I realized the message hadn't ended with me. It had spread, not by my strength, but by his whisper, by his fire, by his mercy. The vision wasn't just a warning, it was a commission. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, thank you. Not just for listening, but for opening your heart to what heaven is trying to say in these days of confusion. This wasn't just my story. This is a wake-up call for all of us. Because whether we're in a small town in Missouri, a busy street in Manila, or a quiet home somewhere in the world, the storm is approaching. The days are evil, but the faithful will shine like stars in the night. Watch, pray, and do not be deceived. We are not powerless. We are not alone. We are the watchmen now. And you, yes, you were meant to hear this. Not to feel afraid, but to remember. Remember who you are. Remember who you belong to. Remember the light that still burns in the darkness. So if this story moved your heart, if it confirmed something deep inside your spirit, if it opened your eyes to what's coming, then don't stay silent. Share it. Speak it. Live it. And before you go, I invite you humbly and from the heart to be part of this growing remnant. Click subscribe to join this channel, Pinoy Faith Stories, where voices like this are shared not to entertain, but to awaken. Hit like if this message stirred your spirit. Leave a comment, even just a prayer emoji, to let us know you're standing with us in faith. And above all, stay alert, stay close to Jesus, and shine your light. Because now is the time, not later, not someday. Now, until next time, may the peace of Christ be with you, and may your spirit stay on fire